You know what? Something about this doesn't add up. And the fact that no one's allowed to say that out loud should concern you more than the story itself.
You might want to keep that to yourself.
Every time something like this happens, we are immediately told what to think, what to believe, and more importantly, what not to question.
These are your lines?
And if you step outside of that line, even slightly, you're labeled, dismissed, shut down. But here's the problem. Truth does not fear questions. Only narratives do. Something about this doesn't add up. What in the world is going on in Candyland? Well, and the fact that no one's allowed to say that out loud. Ooh, did you just talk about Cantifa? Yes. Well, it should concern you that people are scared to talk about this, because every time something like this happens, we are immediately told what to think, what to believe, and more importantly, what not to question. While one side can question absolutely every ridiculous thing they can think of.
Beekeeper who has lost his voice, a cook who thinks he's a gardener, and a witness to a murder.
The other side is not to question the questioners. And if you do, you're labeled, dismissed, shut down. But here's the problem. Truth does not fear questions. Only narratives do. So let me be much more clear. Some of you are like, what are we talking about? I'm not sure what Cantifa is. Well, let me clear it up. I'm not here to make reckless accusations. That's not what it's about. And I'm not going to throw out baseless claims at all. What I am here to do is something much simpler and much more important. It's not being done much. I'm here to ask questions that should be asked, because when something significant happens, there are always two layers. Official story, and then there's the pattern behind that story. And if you never look at the pattern, you will always stay one step behind reality. So let's do that. First, the pattern people ignore. Let's talk about patterns, because patterns tell you things that isolated events never can. When you look at individuals in isolation, everything seems random. But when you zoom out, you start seeing overlap. Shared spaces, shared ideologies, shared communities, and sometimes a very specific subcultures. And here's where it gets interesting, because in multiple cases, not just one, you start seeing connections to online communities that are not just fringe, but deeply shaped by certain ideological frameworks. And that's what's going on here. I agree that it seems like there's a conspiracy. The implicated Tyler Robinson seems to be working with other people. They're just not the people that Candace and others are pointing to. They're the hyper-progressive, far-left, anti-truth, anti-structure, identity-driven trans-Tifa. In many cases, these are people completely detached from reality. And get this, they're being ignored by the woke right, who are completely detached from reality. Now, I'm not saying every person in those spaces is dangerous on the woke right, but I am saying this. When a pattern keeps appearing, and this one, for example, with Tucker and Candace, with these accusations and dreams and vibes, have been going on now for 7 months. Don't ignore it. What are you saying, Pastor Rob? I'm saying maybe we need to investigate the investigator, question her, take this far more seriously, because right now, the pretty much open and shut case is leaning more towards shut.
Done and done.
Next, why questions are shut down. Why are people asking these questions of the questioner? Why does a conversation shut down the moment someone starts connecting dots that are actually logical and have these things called facts backing them up? Well, because we're living in a moment where questioning the wrong thing is considered worse than ignoring the truth. Think about that. Not being wrong, not spreading false information, just asking the wrong questions of the questioners. That's enough to get you labeled, canceled, and demonetized. While the other group breaks all the rules that YouTube says you'll be demonetized for. I'll probably get demonetized for that. And when people start to catch on to that, then they get attacked. In fact, listen to what Tim Pool had to say about this very same thing.
Candace is injecting paranoid delusional states into people's brains. The question then is, why is YouTube allowing it, propping her up for so many people when what she does is clearly against their rules? Now, let me be clear. I am not calling for Candace to be censored in any way. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. However, it is particularly difficult to disinfect the garbage when YouTube shadow bans and shuts you down and puts her on the front page. So how do you combat? There's the question. Why is she allowed to say things that YouTube has clearly banned?
Well, all this creates something dangerous. It creates a culture where people self-censor, where they see something that doesn't make sense or even exist.
Unicorns aren't real.
They aren't?
But they stay quiet about it because the cost of speaking up feels way too high. And this is where I actually agree with something you've probably seen before, unless you're under a rock. I call it the Candace effect. There's a certain instinct right now that says, don't just accept what you're told, look deeper. And then instead of diving deeper, we surface.
You're the most superficial, shallow person I've ever met.
Here's what's weird about it. The instinct is right. The instinct is necessary. The instinct is how you avoid being manipulated. But here's where things go off the rails. When that instinct is applied inconsistently, when it's aimed only in one direction, read here, Israel, or the Jews, but completely ignores everything else, that's when it's dangerous. Because listen, real discernment doesn't pick sides, it just follows truth. Well, listen, if you're only skeptical of one side, then you are definitely not a discerning person. You're predictable. Fourth, what does all this reveal? It reveals that we are not just dealing with isolated actions. We are dealing with environments, influence systems, communities that shape thinking, behavior, definitely identity. And when those environments are built on confusion, they produce more confusion.
I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Let me put it this way. And people start going after the dreams and the vibes and not the facts. I'll say it real plainly. The only facts in the Charlie Kirk case point to Tyler Robinson and his furry friends. But when is the last time that Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson brought up the guy who's actually in prison awaiting trial for this crime? I think it was the 12th of never. Next, there's a biblical framework we ought to be looking at because Scripture tells us test everything, not ignore everything, not ignore Scripture, test it. Right now, Candace is attacking people that actually use the Bible to say how we ought to act and how we ought to look into things and how we ought to conduct ourselves and the fruit of the Spirit and all that. She attacks that. I mean, that should be game over. Is it? No, it's game on for many people. Well, I would highly recommend not going down that path. So the next time you're told, don't ask that, don't go there, that's off limits, I would ask that. I would absolutely go there. And I would say, no, Candace, you are no longer off limits. Neither are you, Megyn Kelly. Neither are you, Tucker Carlson, Theo Vaughn, and so many others. Grifters. And why should they be? Truth doesn't need protection from questions. So this video is for the smaller, ever shrinking group of those willing to think instead of just reacting. If you know people like that, share this, because more people need to start asking better questions of the questioners. I'm Rob Singleton. I'll see you in the next video.